Sziasztok! Alex vagyok. Hamins kilenc éves. Tesztelő voltam, ez most főnök vagyok. Angliában születtem, de most Németországban élek. Beszélek angolul, németül és franciaul, és most tanulok magyarul. Sajnos, most angolul fogok beszélni. Köszönöm. I am not learning Hungarian just for this conference. We have Bradex has a Hungarian subsidiary, Hungary KFT, and I have a lot of Hungarian colleagues now, and I like languages and I like learning new things. So I decided to learn the really easy language of Hungarian. Slides away. What is with your language? Okay. You can talk to me about that later. This is me. Apart from all of the other things I like old stones. I like wearing pretty dresses. I also like crawling through mud, not necessarily in the pretty dresses. Those are two separate hobbies. I like goats, and generally I also like humans. I work for Bradex. We're based in Germany. We have a subsidiary in Hungary. I am a fantastic boss, so if you're looking for somewhere else to work, come and talk to me. And that's that. So, does everybody understand me okay? Yeah? Okay. I grew up in Liverpool, so my accent is different. So I'll try and not speak too fast. I want to give you an overview today of what the world used to be like. So I've been in IT now for 17 years. And if you think I look old, it's because I've been in IT for 17 years. And if you think I look young, thank you, and we can talk later. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our journey to cross-functional teams. I'm going to talk to you about this comb shaping. It has nothing to do with hair. Paul was very worried when I told him this. He's like, I don't think I'm the right person for this. Everyone is the right person for this. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can achieve that if you want to, as a person and as a team. I'm also going to give you some tips for managers. It's funny, when I was a tester, I spent a lot of time hoping that I could make people hate testers less. And then when I became a manager, I was like, this is going to be fine now. Everyone loves managers, right? No. So I'm going to give managers some tips, or maybe some tips for you to work with your managers. So let's go way back when. When I started learning about testing and reading the first books that I read about testing, and funnily enough, I couldn't actually find these sources anymore. So I don't think I dreamt it, but if I did, it's on the slide anyway. And I've pressed C. I knew I was going to get caught up. So it used to be the case that they said separation is best. You have people developing things, and the people testing that should be as far away as humanly possible from those people so they have nothing to do with each other for reasons of independence. But I don't know, I think there was this idea of we can't possibly tell them what we're developing because then they'll know what to test. And so the idea was like, ideally, a completely separate team in a completely separate company. If not that, then at least a separate team. And if you're really going to be crazy and wild enough to have someone in the team, then they are never allowed to touch their own stuff. And this is the mindset that I grew up learning about. But even then, when I started in tech in 2005, it was already becoming a bit like, that's so 90s. And this is actually a picture of me from the 90s, because I had a grunge phase too. And this was before I learned to smile. It was cool to not be happy right then. And so already I was learning about this agile approach, which says that maybe we don't want handovers. Maybe part of the problem that happens when we work together and try to work together is in that gap of a handover, both in terms of time, also in terms of knowledge, in terms of people, in terms of how we've been communicating and collaborating. And we want to have people in the team. And this has always been a big problem with the Agile Manifesto as well, because it refers to the development team. And then you get a lot of people saying, but that doesn't say testers. Well, no, because the whole team is developing the project. We'll talk about that a little bit later, perhaps. And we need to share responsibility, and we need to share tasks, which means in comparison to the older way of thinking, everyone's going to be automating. And yes, sometimes that's going to be the stuff that you've written as well. You're probably going to be exploring if you're a developer. You're probably going to be doing some exploratory testing. And yes, to some degree, things that you've developed as well. And interestingly enough, the stuff only I've developed is going to be less and less. So when I started out, I remember that we thought we were agile, but we weren't, and I'll get to that in a second. We would have somebody working on a feature for 3 weeks on their own, and then they would commit and go on holiday. And that would break the build. It wouldn't just break the tests, it would break the build. We could no longer build. And nobody understood what this person had been working on for 3 weeks because they'd shut themselves away. And we've changed from that now. We're doing a lot smaller commits. People are working together a lot more often. So, of course, we're all always kind of testing our own things as well. And so far, the world's not ended. And if it is, it's not because of that. So, and it wasn't easy for us to move away from that. We knew we had this idea of we want to be this agile, we want to profit from fast feedback, things like that. I was the first non-developer in our company, I think. I don't think I was an accidental hire. They kept me for a long time and made me boss, so that was okay. But I was the first one, and I was a foreign body. I mean, the humans were lovely, but in terms of how they worked together, I was not wanted. I asked questions at the wrong time. I mean, I asked questions. Any time was the wrong time. I found problems. I begged and begged for them to build me again. This is in the days before continuous builds. I grew up when you had to go and beg a developer to build for you, maybe bribe him or her with a biscuit, and hope that the build worked the same way it did last time because it was all just in their development environment. Developers wouldn't test. They wouldn't go anywhere near it. We had no automated tests on any level for various reasons. And I, as a tester, had my own tools that the developers wouldn't use. I was solely responsible for all exploratory testing and for UI automation using a tool that I could use, but they wouldn't because it was not in a programming language. And they were like, I'm not doing that. So we thought at that point, we were like, look at us, we're pretty agile. We've got a tester in the team, automation's happening. And actually, we really weren't that cross-functional because we still had silos. We didn't have enough communication. I had to fight tooth and nail against the process. Like I say, not against the people, but against the process to be involved and to be heard. And if I did find something for them to listen to me, that it was important. We had too much specific people for specific tasks, and we didn't work I mean, we had big, long, sad meetings with each other, but I wouldn't call that collaboration. There was a lot of shouting. So we went on a journey. Because I started going to conferences, I started hearing about things. I think reasonably early on, we invited Lisa Crispin to come and talk to us, and we thought that she was going to be like, yeah, you're all super agile. And she's like, yeah, you're not really doing this right yet. So we had a few things to work on. And we went on a journey. And this is a short form of the journey, but I think it's relevant to hear some of the things that we maybe did. And then I'll tell you why this is relevant for comb shaping. I will get there. So, a journey to becoming more cross-functional. The first thing that I did, because this was in my sphere of control, started teaching developers how to do exploratory testing. That involved a fair amount of bribery as well. But also it was based of the pain that they knew that our release phases, we still had release phases, which is a sign number one that we weren't particularly agile. They felt the pain as well. They knew that it would take a long time. They knew they had to help out. So I spent some time teaching them how to do exploratory testing. And the responses went from, oh my God, please don't make me a tester. You'd be lucky. To, well, are you going to teach the testers how to code as well? And that's the next slide, because yes, we were. Although at the time we didn't know it. So we got developers kind of more on board with thinking about the fact that they might have to do exploratory testing as well. We weren't even talking about automation yet. This was just, help us with the stuff that we still have to do manually. Found that that helped us a fair bit, and realized at some point that if we really, really, really wanted the developers to play with us on automation, that we as testers were going to have to learn to play with their tools as well. And this is one of the big things in the industry. I have stood on stages and said, testers shouldn't code. I've changed my mind. I don't think they should code. I think that it's kind of a useful skill if you want to have it for solving some of the problems that we have in technology. And the more testers, I see a lot of testers doing a lot more of that. The nice thing is that if you're coding as a tester for automation, it's not quite the same thing as writing a backend. There's a fair amount of difference between those two levels of complexity. And here, this was fun. So the developers on one side had conversations like, are you going to teach the testers to code then? Which I understand. You're pushing me out of my comfort area. Are other people going to suffer too? Very human. But then when they did start to learn to code and started to have opinions about how tests were written, they were like, you can't tell me how to write code. It was all kinds of fun. But the thing is that these moments of friction and these having to talk to each other and being able to talk to each other were moving us in exactly the direction that we wanted to be, that nothing just belonged to anyone anymore. Suddenly testers were saying, oh, I've learned that we could do it like this. And developers were saying, I've learned that when I write code for automation, maybe different practices apply than when I'm writing my back-end code or otherwise. And this made everyone kind of have to play together a little bit more, which was part of the idea. What we also did was started talking a lot more about the idea that quality is so much more than just testing. Testing is important. It's incredibly important. But if we only think of our work as testers as testing, and that's one of the names in the industry that I dislike the most, because I'm happy to call myself a tester, but to a lot of people that means that I just manually click through things at the end, which I think we all know is definitely not a part of our job, the only part of our job. So we talked about things like, hey, maybe it would be nice if the testing didn't find so many problems because we've been doing good practice things throughout. So we need to be delivering feedback. Sometimes the feedback is, it works. It can happen, right? that can happen. Helping others to test, so doing some coaching, doing some consulting work within the team, talking about testability. Okay, we have this feature, how are we going to test it? Okay, well, that's going to be a problem, isn't it? Because we are going to have to test this. Talking about risk and value, helping with pipelines and automation. And the nice thing with that is that it doesn't have to be, I am sitting down writing the pipeline. It can be things like, how quickly do we want this feedback? Why are we having to wait for the feedback for this, this, and this? Communication and collaboration, making sure that my advice to testers the world over is, if you're not already inviting yourself to all of the meetings, then do. I've never been kicked out of meetings. Even before I get kicked out of more meetings now I'm a boss. We don't want you here. Than I did when I was a tester. I'm like, I'm just here to listen and maybe ask some questions and find out what's going to happen in the next sprint. So all of these things around this, that we got this idea that these people in the team are less just testing some things that they own and more quality glue, helping everybody to do the tasks necessary that we need as a team to deliver good software. It took time. I'm not going to say that this was done in a year. I think it took a lot longer than that. I think it would have taken less time had we got some outside help or whatever, but change takes time. So it takes culture, it takes people doing the same things again and again. Sometimes it takes a new hire. Sometimes it takes somebody leaving the team who was maybe blocking it. All of these things come together. And now, I want to share a couple of examples with you of what that looks like before we get into why I think that this is actually quite a good model for us as teams and humans. So one of my favorite teams at the moment has 2 of my testers. These 2 testers are very, very good. They're also reasonably technical, and they enjoy doing a lot of work with code. And both of them have decided that they want to kind of bridge the gap to testing and developing. They're 2 of the partial developers in the team as well. They also do a lot of development. And the developers are used to, in this team, automating and exploring as well. I have another team. They have a full-time tester. He can do a bit of automation. It's not his favorite thing. He doesn't love being in the code, but he is one of the best test analysts I know. If you give him a problem, he will tell you where to test. He knows how to do it, and he knows what data to do with it. He's responsible, though, for the strategy of automation because he knows which things he wants to already have executed before he goes and does manual things or works with other people. He's involved now in customer support meetings because they've realized that having that person in there is a really good idea. And the developers, they're not the most comb-shaped team. They're not the most cross-functional. They're not going to be like, yes, please give me a testing task to do completely voluntarily. But they help out everywhere where it's needed because they've realized that that's a good idea. Third example also has a full-time tester, somebody in the team all of the time. And I love this guy. He's managed to be the person who has the quality hat. He goes to conferences, he brings new ideas in, he maybe sets up, I don't know, Mockito or Cypress as an example. And then he enables the team and I do not know how he does it. I think he's one of the most influential people ever, but you wouldn't know it to look at him. Everybody else does all of the work. But that's fine because it works for the team and he's always then got the space to think about extra things. One of the things he does like doing is if when a developer has written their unit tests, that he goes over to them as like, okay, you missed a few equivalence classes, let's add those. So he's gone from sort of, or the role of these kind of people has gone from, I'm only doing UI automation and I'm doing it at the end to, come on, let me help you with your unit tests. This is cool. So one could ask the question right now, Alex, are you saying that everybody has to be able to do everything? And my answer to that is no. What we have, and when we talk about cross-functional teams, we're talking about the team. Not that every single person in the team has to be cross-functional on all levels. There is just too much to do. Developers at the moment are a lot of developers are saying we can only really be focused on front-end or back-end. I have mixed feelings about that, but I at least want them to be able to look at the other side. But we have things going on. We have UX coming into teams, user experience. Of course, we have quality. We have security. We have ops, things that teams need to do. And I see a future where we might have things like DevSec, ethic, green ops. Like all of this is going to be in the team. So it's just not possible to have one person that can do all of that. But as a team, if we're capable of not just looking at our very, very own area, I know a little bit about that. I know enough about that. I can help out with this. If such and such is on holiday, then the team won't fall apart. Sharing activities that might previously have been just one role, that is what leads us to this comb shaping. So, what do I mean with this? Actually, I got the term from Damien Sinados, I think. I didn't invent it. And I think a lot of people might know the idea of T-shape. So you have a lot of general knowledge, and you have one specialization. And then there was pie shape, which is going to be hard. This is the other pie. Then you have maybe 2 levels of specialization, and the idea of comb shaping is that like a comb to brush your hair, you will have a lot of general knowledge, and you have a lot of, in English we say teeth, the teeth in the comb, right? You'll have a lot of things, and some of them will be very deep, and some of them will be very shallow. And over time, I'll show you my example of my comb in a second, over time, they'll change. I have gotten so much worse at actually automating, but so much better at management in the last years, obviously, because what am I practicing? I'm practicing managing humans, and I'm less practicing automating tests. If you put me back in a project in a few months, that might change again a bit, right? That's fine. We're always constantly growing. So we have multiple specializations. And interestingly enough, the more we practice having more specializations, the better we get at learning new things. It's almost like our brain is plastic and malleable and learns how to learn. And I think that there's even proof from that from psychology and things. There is the thing that we need to look out for, and I'll tell you about that later on with the managers, and that's cognitive overload, but we'll get there. We end up being, and then a comb shape can be very, very generalist, like I have small teeth for all of my things, or it can have some very deep specializations. So let me show you mine. This is what I thought when I did this. I think I'm pretty damn good at exploratory testing. I think communication, leadership, and agile is where I have my best specializations now. I've said test automation concepts because if you did sit me down in front of Cypress, I'd go, But if you're talking to me and asking me how to do things or pairing me with somebody who's working on it, I'm pretty damn good. Same goes for programming. You wouldn't want to put me as a developer in your team, but if you sit me next to a developer in your team, I'm good enough to help. I'm okay at project management. I'm having to learn about finance to be a boss, and numbers are not my favorite thing, but I'm learning it. And I was a product owner for a long time, and so I'm fairly good at that. That's probably not even all of the things, but I think every single one of you is capable of finding, hey, I do this, this, and this. A metaphor I always like to say of this as well is that I don't want us to be chimeras. So a chimera is a creature from Greek mythology, which has, I think, the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a something. It's a horrible thing. I didn't put a picture in because it's disgusting. But this is the idea that we sometimes get for how our team people should be. You are fixed in the things you can do. It doesn't look nice. And these are the things you can do. I like the idea of being a chameleon. I like the idea of slightly changing what my role is, colour, what my role is, depending on the situation. And that's fine. And I like the idea of us being flexible like that, because we will always need to be adapting to changes in context. Okay. So we've been doing this, and I said that we've been doing this for a while because it seems to be the correct or a good agile way of doing things. But I think that we're going to need this even more in the future. So I'd like to look into the crystal ball a little bit, with the potential that I could be horribly wrong. I've been wrong before. I will survive. I think that teams are going to have even more to do in the future. I said it before. The idea of good collaboration and good value for customers and making sure that it's high quality and it has good UX and it's secure and it's delivered and released frequently. We don't want to be doing that with handovers. We're learning always and again that keeping that stuff close to the team, keeping the experts together is a good idea. But the sheer amount of responsibility that we're going to have is a lot. And I don't necessarily think that that's going to be done by people only focusing on one thing, which makes it interesting for my next slide, because we are in an interesting balance. Despite this, I still firmly believe that we need specialists. But the role of a specialist isn't to be, this is my area, you are not allowed to touch my tests. If you touch my tests, Paul, we're going to have a problem, right? That's not my role. My role is to do coaching. It's to see the activities. It's to do some of the activities, but it's also to share them with the team. You cannot comb shape every specialty away. I do not believe that. And the other thing that I like to say about why we need specialists is because, first of all, they have the focus. So they are the people in any given meeting. If I'm there as a product owner, I know what my role is. If I'm there as a tester, maybe I'm developing in the sprint, maybe I'm helping UX, maybe I'm talking at conferences, but my role in that meeting is that I am here listening with my quality ears. And that helps a team. It's also about specialization. When I go to developer conferences, I say, okay, well, which one of you wants to go to the test conference and learn about testing things? And they're like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Otherwise, how are we going to get the knowledge from external networking, conferencing? We need to get that in the team. And the other thing is passion. I wouldn't want anyone to be in a tester role or a developer role or a UX role or any role that they weren't excited about doing, right? So I want the people to be able to do that. And at the same time, there is the balance of, I am the specialist, I have the hat on. That might be a Germanism. The problem with speaking so many languages is that they kind of get mixed up at some point. So I'm responsible for this, but I'm not solely responsible, and I'm not becoming the bus factor. Do you know the word bus factor? So it's, for those who don't, it's how many people would have to be let's say drive away on a bus. How many people would have to drive away on a bus for the team to have problems? And if that number is 1, then that's bad. Because if it means that that person goes, then we have problems. There is also the reverse bus factor, which we talk about less, but that is how many people would have to drive away on a bus for us to have fewer problems. We talk about that less. That's a thing that managers have to talk about, but that's a whole other conversation. So if we kind of extrapolate that, then that might mean that your stand-up in 2030 looks like this. Hello, team. What are we getting done today? Because if we do need or do add specialists for every single role, then even if they're working well together, then what we're going to have is a communication nightmare. Because there is still the idea that a team should be able to be fed by 1 or 2 pizzas, and that's going to be too big. So I think that we might need to find different ways of working, for which we will also need to be cone-shaped. So, and this is funny because I was very proud of myself because I'm like, wait, what if sometimes the specialists aren't there all of the time? What if we manage to enable the team such that the normal activities get done by the core team, and then the specialists come in at the beginning and during, and this is not moving back to handovers, but really enabling the team. And I was like so excited about this. And then somebody told me that somebody had actually already had that idea and written a book about it. So I have done my duty and read enough of the book. I haven't finished it yet, and I will be honest with you about that, to give you the slight overview of where I'm coming from. The idea is that we might at some point have teams that are delivering value. These are the yellow ones. And the purple ones are ones that help them to do that for specific things. Now, I've tried this out sometimes through necessity if we just didn't have enough tester capacity or enough budget. These are the realities of the world, right? I would love to have a full-time tester on every team. And sometimes I don't have the humans, and sometimes the customer doesn't have the money. What am I going to do? So you find ways of being pragmatic. And we've done things like this, and it works pretty well as long as the team is really, really behind the idea that they are responsible for this and aren't just like, we're going to wait till the tester comes back. That's never going to work. But I've never tried it out deliberately. So this is me sharing potential ideas with you. I don't know whether this will be more for the testers. I don't know whether it will be for UX. I honestly don't know. But we might need to experiment with working differently to deal with complexity and not to have the problem of too many levels of communication. The nice thing is I always do my predictions such that even if they're wrong, we can learn from them. So it's a safety net. If we do have a team full of full-time people, I sincerely believe that we are going to have to cone shape, because everybody is going to have to be helping out with things, because it will be a terrible idea in the complex, difficult world that we live in, with some of the software that we're doing, with some of the effects that this software is going to have knowledge only in one person's head. I think that that's terribly dangerous. And if we do end up working with things like enabling teams where everybody isn't there all of the time, then most definitely we're going to need to be doing things that maybe aren't formally our job description. It'll also help us to reduce bus factors. We talked about that. To reduce friction. Friction's a concept I've only just learned about. It's basically the reason why everything always feels a bit crappy. It's because we don't know what we need. When we do something, it doesn't always have the effect that we want. And if we tell people what to do, they don't always do what we want them to do. And there's whole books about it. And it's incredibly interesting and very useful to know that that's the way the world is. But the closer we work together, the better that we can reduce that friction. It helps us to manage complexity and to increase understanding and empathy for each other. I find since I've started learning about unit testing and development, I am so much kinder to developers because I realize how many decisions they have to make on a daily basis that we've never talked about. And I realize how hard it is to decide what to test. I mean, I'm sorry to admit this, but I will be vulnerable for you. I once in my life asked a developer who said, well, I don't know what to test. I once said something like, well, that's a bit terrifying that you don't know what to test if you're writing the code. Not very empathetic of me, right? I could have been nicer. And now I've seen it, and I've realized that it is actually quite hard to figure out what I'm going to test. But you get better at it with practice. So, empathy is good too. So, I assume you're all completely on board, willing to comb shape. Let's go, Alex. So, as a person, I think the first most important thing is that you have to have a growth mindset. That's the idea that I don't say I can't do it. I say I can't do it yet. I'm willing to learn. I know that learning will sometimes be uncomfortable. But so far, we've all managed to learn all of the things that we needed to do. I think, interestingly enough, as much as I've hated the last couple of years for a few reasons, living with a pandemic has taught us that we are adaptable and that we are capable of doing things that we didn't think that we could do. So hopefully we all have that to some degree. And then you can go things like pairing with people. Can I sit next to you? Can I ask questions? Can I learn? Can you help me with this? Basics courses, even if I've done so many basics courses in things that I know I'm never going to use, but just having a bit more understanding puts me on the step to ask a slightly better question, which gives me slightly better understanding. And it's always pleasing for me when new colleagues who don't know where I came from, when they think that in my past life I was a developer, and I've not managed to convince them of that that's not the case by saying something ridiculously stupid. Be okay with not knowing things, go to conferences, have a network, hobbies. A lot of the things that we do in our free time actually, I mean, apart from keeping us sane, right, because life's not just about work, they actually help us. The skills that I learn here, I can adapt to work. The fact that I know how to do this gives me an analogy for how to deal with a problem somewhere else. And I think being curious. So that's on a personal level. But I want to give you a few things for your teams as well. There's a lovely exercise that I like to do called an expectation matrix. I think I invented it, but I'm not sure. And it doesn't really matter. It involves sticking Post-its, either real or virtual, on a wall. And I write down, for me, in my official specialist role, what kind of activities do I do? What do I bring to the team? What can you expect that are the things that I will do? And then I write down for all of the other roles, what kind of activities I'd expect you to do. And then we map them with each other. And then there will be conversations. Fiona might tell me that there's no way in hell that she's maintained the continuous integration structure. No, Alex, I'm not doing that. And then we're like, okay, it's good that we had this conversation before we had problems. And the other thing that you can use it for is to see where too many activities are clustered just around one person. And then you can start to say, okay, who's interested in helping with this? Who's interested in learning about this? So that we can really work on this idea of us as a team. And this will change. This is an activity that we can do every time we get a new team member, every time we lose a team member, and maybe just every so often anyway, to really have conversations about our expectations of each other and to start sharing things that we notice that they're too close just to one person. The added benefit as well of this is that it gives you a lovely overview and, again, empathy of all of the stuff that some of your team members do that you didn't even realize. It makes it visible. You can introduce new questions. How will we deal with this risk? I like this one instead of saying, how will we test this? Because people start to get very like, I'm going to do it like this exactly. This is a risk. How will we deal with it? And sometimes, I know now as a manager, one of the ways of dealing with risks is to ignore them. I would not recommend that for all of them. But it's a thing that we can talk about. We can mitigate them by saying, we have insurance. Or we can say, okay, we're going to do tests, or we're going to send people to a training course, or we're going to get this person in to help us to review all kinds of things. So I like saying, how will we deal with this risk as a team, instead of just saying, how will we test it? When we are talking about testing, what level? One of the things I used to hate doing UI automation was when someone was like, yes, please iterate over this table and then check whether the button is active or not active, depending on what you've put in. And I'm like, is this not a unit test? Like, should I have to do all of these data sets, or could have this not be done somewhere else? So having those conversations, and if you realize, oh, we can't do that yet at the unit level, That's a risk as well, right? So we talk about that. How will we know if it works? And one of my favorite ones in stand-ups, what can we get done today? Not what's in test and Alex has to do it, but what can we as a team get done? And I tell you this as a product owner and as now as a manager, done is the only thing that will bring value, and done is also the only thing that will give payment. And it turns out, I told you I'm learning about finance, right? It turns out that customers paying us has an effect on us being able to pay our people. Weird, right? So being done is very important. So reducing work in progress. I love doing this experiment with teams. If you want to find where you have blockages, force people to focus on fewer things so that they can't be like, oh, I'm stuck on that, I'm going to go and work on this. You will find where the problems are. This is again towards getting things done, and it will force, let's not go with force, let's go with encourage. It will encourage the team to work together on things, because you can't then say, well, I'm just the database expert, I'm not going to help here. If you really can't help, there's plenty of other things you can do. You can pair with people, you can create more tests, you can update documentation, you can create examples for whatever, but you're not allowed to start on a new task until this one is done. And that's a really good experiment. And the nice thing Ray was talking yesterday, it's safe to fail. At any given time, we can say, oh, we really are too blocked, and then deal with it in the retrospective. But it will show you where your problems are. Delete the to test column if you haven't already. This is not the hill I'll die on. I have more important hills that I will die on. But we did this as an experiment in our team, and we noticed that it did help us in combination with the what can we get done today. We'd look at the in progress, and it would have 3 things in it, and we had a work in progress of 3. And we knew we had to get things done. Because if somebody said, I'm going to start working on this, we're like, no, you're not. We've still got 3 things to do. So we tend as humans to, if we have a column for to test, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Even though we know theoretically we could all be working on it, we kind of go, who's the tester? Right? So that's an experiment you can do. I'd like to encourage you to do more pairing and more ensembling. Who has not heard of ensembling as a term? Cool. Okay, a couple of hands at the back. You might have heard of mobbing. If you have heard of that, this is the kind of newer and slightly less horrible name for it. And hopefully true. The idea is that similarly to pairing, you get a group of people together. You have one person who is the driver, who is typing but not allowed to think. And the thoughts and the input comes from the rest of the group. So it's kind of pairing plus plus. And it's really, really good. It's a bit more frustrating than just sitting on your own for 3 weeks in some ways. I'll give you that. And for non-extroverts, it can be very tiring, but it's worth it. And you can do it with the testers, with the product owner. You can even have one of your key users in there. Because the moment you have the question of how are we doing this, you have your stakeholders in the room to help you decide. And that helps you to learn from each other. It helps you to onboard people. All of the tacit information about how we do things in a team that maybe we never talk about comes to light there. So it's a fantastic way of solving hard problems, solving easy problems to learn from each other, and just generally getting that cone shaping really going in the team. In general, I'd say the final thing for teams is just to be open to experiments. I think that the world is... No, I see the world is changing. It's changing constantly. And the way that we work now might not be the way that we need to work to keep up with that. So I think we all need to be brave. And yes, sticking to agile principles. Like I say, I don't want to go back to handovers for the kind of projects that I work on at the moment. But sticking to the principles, finding and experimenting with new ways. And in the worst case, after a week, we say, no, that was a terrible idea, and at least we've learned. I had very good experience with doing an experiment within the company. We had core working hours. And we were like, there's so many risks if we get rid of them. What if customers are sad? What if people are... So do you know what? Let's experiment. Let's tell people it's an experiment. You have to work 5 days a week. You can't go to 4. You have to get your hours done, and it has to work for your team and your project. And we said we're going to monitor how it goes for 6 months. We had a few criteria of what we thought might happen if it was going well or going not well. After, I think, 2-3 months at the latest, we said, nothing has changed. Everyone was happier because they didn't have to be there at 9 o'clock, even if they had other things or they didn't work like that. So just being able to experiment and honestly asking yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen if this goes wrong? A trick that I do sometimes give to teams is do an experiment that has probably no meaning to start. Move your stand-up 5 minutes earlier. That's probably not going to have an effect. But if you notice a lot of pushback from the team, that might be the first thing that you have to work on. Because if you're not willing to change 5 minutes for your stand-up, then you're probably going to have problems doing other things. So, are there any managers in the room? Am I on my own? Hello, hi, hearts. So, I think for us as managers, we have to allow this. And allow means that if I've got a developer going to a testing conference, then I'm like, that's cool. It's good that you're comb shaping. Thank you for doing that. Don't have the belief that one person working on one thing at a time is always the best way. I know that we have to look at things sometimes in terms of how many hours and how many monies and all of these things. But the sum of our efforts is not always as easy as just who wrote how many lines of code. That's not where the value necessarily, it's where we get paid for the value at the end, yes, but that's not where it's coming from. So we have to be okay with seeing a group of people working together and not thinking, well, that's not very efficient, right? We have to trust teams that they know how to get the work done, but we also have to see when we're seeing problems and be like, can we help you with this? What can I do? How do you need me to help you to deal with this? Also, this is the danger from the other side, that if you do have that one developer who goes to a testing conference, don't assume that that person is then suddenly just as specialized as somebody who's been doing this for 10 years, right? We don't want to make people into Swiss Army knives who are doing everything. And the difficulty with this comb shaping is that we're forcing ourselves more often to context switch, and we have more cognitive load. And I don't know about you, but my cognitive load does not need to get higher at the moment. It's fine where it is. I think that that's a natural reaction to the complexity of our work, which is why one of the things I preach in other keynotes is minimalism. Don't do stuff. Like, the things that I don't do are really, really good, but that's a whole other thing. I think this is a fact of life, but we do have to be aware of it. And some people deal with it better than others, and we need to give them guidance in that. Okay, well, Alex, but what if I don't wanna? What if I don't wanna comb shape? What if I wanna, actually work on something for 3 weeks on end and not have to talk to anybody? I see you. That's not who I am, but I know that there are people like that, and I care about them deeply. I believe currently in the world there are still enough projects and places where that will still be okay. We still have some in our company. When they're gone, I hope that I will find other places for these, because these people are fantastic. They're really, really good at what they do. They're just not going to be that kind of comb-shaped person. So I really hope I will find places for them. If we don't, those are going to be hard conversations. I think that if you are that kind of person, though, if you're like, please just let me work on my own, the thing I would ask you is that even if you don't want to comb shape, help others to, still share your knowledge. Don't be the bus factor. Be the person who is at least sharing what they know so that other people can comb shape. I think that there's still probably enough places where it's okay. It's not my way, and it's not what I try and encourage people to do, but everybody is different, and that's also okay. So, last slide. I think that growth mindset has always been incredibly important in IT anyway. I don't think that any of us would have made it this far without realizing that we have to keep learning. I remember for my testers, we'd literally just taught them all Java, and then we made the switch to web technologies, and they had to start learning JavaScript. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And I know it's got Java in the name, but nah, it's different. So I think we've always been aware of this. We always have to keep learning. I think that regardless of how you're doing it, even if you don't get brilliant at these things, the understanding and empathy that you will get for other people in your team will go a great way to helping you work together better as a team, even if you don't become the person that can fix the database. You understand the database woman, she understands you, you're going to have fewer arguments. And conflict is terrible for quality, right? I think we all know this. And I think that we already are comb-shaped. I think that if every single one of you goes away and says, I'm going to do my little comb, for your hobbies, for what you do, for what experience you have, we do have that. And it's okay. And this isn't a big step for a lot of us. We might just need to be a bit more explicit about working towards it. And I think that we can be happy and proud of that in our roles. So, köszönöm a figyelmet, van kérdésetek.
Alex, thank you so much. That was great. Lots of questions. If you keep them coming on Slido, it's the best place to put any queries you've got for any speaker in the show. First one. It's a popular question.
Okay.
I'm just going to throw it and see where it goes. Most of the managers do not like comb qualities. Okay. On the other hand, colleagues are afraid that you are trying to get their position.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So for the managers, I'd say find better managers. They do exist. Or like that's maybe a bit harsh. Have that conversation. Tell them that you saw this awesome keynote and that you want to try things out. Tell them that you think it would be good for this and that reason. I mean, we were talking about it yesterday. The language of managers is risk and value. What risks do I have and what value? And that's not just money. We're not all that bad. But where are the risks? What risks do you see as a manager? And what value do I think it could bring? And then you're going to have the right kind of conversation. And if they still say no, then find a better manager. People being afraid you're going to take their jobs. Yes. I was going to mention that and then didn't, but you all noticed. It's a tough one. It really is, because it's easy to say, well, of course not, and of course we're doing this, because I think it depends a great deal not only on the culture of the company, about how you see people being rewarded or not rewarded, and what they get, whether do teams get rewarded, do people get rewarded, and what kind of things do they get rewarded for. But the other things that we have, so on the culture, I think we can have an influence. We can't control it, but we can influence it. But the other side of it is people. The other side of it is if that person, for whatever reason, is so incredibly married to the role and the importance of it, then the only thing that person can do is choose to change themselves, and there's nothing that we can do about it. But we can be understanding. We can understand that I hear you. What can we do to make you feel like that's not the case? Tell them as well about the risks of, but what happens if you get sick? What happens if you leave the company? And I've been in this situation before, that I have taken somebody out of a project and moved them somewhere else because they were developing themselves into the toxic rock star who wouldn't share. And it was better for the project to deal without their knowledge for a while and to build it up themselves than it was to suffer having this one person being a blockage for everything. So that's the answer. And of course, there are more forceful ways, or more harsh ways if the person doesn't fit in any projects anymore. That wasn't the case here. But yeah, if they're being very difficult about it, then taking them out is maybe a good idea.
Thank you. The Slido questions are there, but I'm going to use my
Okay.
I can read it easier from here. Adam asks, besides biscuits, how do you motivate the testers / developers to move out from their comfort zone and learn new things?
Whips. No. I think it's hard to put into words, because I think this is something that I've tended to do quite naturally, and so it's always hard to figure out what the steps are. I think that so I don't know nearly enough about how change management actually works, but I think that it's basically change management. What I like to do myself is, first of all, be the example. So if I'm going to encourage all of my people to go and do something, I sit down and do it as well. I do not have to get good at it. I just have to show that I am also willing to be vulnerable. Then I go and find an ally. I find somebody who's willing to pair with me, who shares my wild ideas, and preferably somebody who is on the side, right? So that person might then be a developer or a very influential tester. And then I kind of offer some general courses, some basis things. Then we have a few more conversations. Maybe I bring someone in from a conference, and it kind of then becomes this is the thing to be doing. And that's really vague, but it's worked. So it's somewhere between being vulnerable yourself, finding an ally, and keep doing the small steps. All change is made of tiny, tiny, tiny steps. So just keep going.
I think also you can ask people what makes them feel uncomfortable and just say, well, okay, you want a comfy cushion, the chairs aren't comfortable. It might be something crazy. The developers are all aggressive, and I don't want to be part of that team because of that. Okay, we need to look at that. Ask, I think, is the thing to say. Okay, that's biscuits out the way. How do you see the future of hiring, especially in leadership roles with the COMB qualities? Will specialists still get preference? That's an interesting one. Mm.
I think that any good company needs a mix of people. I think that we will need people who are really, really, really good at things, and I definitely want those people to be sharing knowledge. So if I hire someone who is like the cloud native expert for whatever, and that person, I'm probably going to pay them a lot of money for that. And if that person can be in one project at one time and never shares any knowledge, that's not helping me. So I do believe that we need the very good people, but they need to be sharing that. They need to be enabling others. And of course, we need people who are good at various things and then kind of act as conduits and as glue and can be put into different roles. One of the hardest meetings of my week is disposition, which is which humans are going into which projects. And it's so damn complicated. Like, if you've never even had to be in one of these meetings, be glad, because it's all kinds of things with, okay, well, we have an expert for that, but we don't want 4 experts in a team for one thing. That would be terrible. But at the same time, we might need somebody who is a bit more senior, because otherwise we just have juniors, and that's going to go wrong. But this person doesn't like working with that person, and this person actually wants to go in that direction. We need a mix, because if we only ever have the same kind of people, and I mean this not just for skills, but also for their backgrounds, their ethnicity, all of the wonderful diversity aspects, you have to have that mix. So I think that there's room for everybody, apart from the assholes.
Cool. Okay.
Am I allowed to swear?
Next.
Sure.
Your testing passion is really impressive. Do you still engage in any kind of testing now that you're a CEO?
Yes. I'm no longer the person who's in the team as a tester. I think that would be a terrible waste of their time because I would be called out to meetings all of the time. I try and pair as much as I can. I go and work with customers to do workshops on exploratory testing a lot of the time, or general test strategy. And I have the unfortunate joy of being a born tester and bug magnet, which means that anything in this world I touch falls apart. So I spend my whole life looking at things and being like, well, that's interesting. How did that happen? Or, oh, why does this not work? I was sharing experiences in my tutorial on Tuesday. I ordered something from an online shop. I won't mention it here. Decided I had to cancel it. Got the cancellation email, and from the email it said, okay, if you need to reorder one of these things, do it. And I clicked reorder, and it opened it, and I went and put things. That thing never made it into the cart. From the email, I could not get it. It was so, and then of course I kind of go back and forth a bit, and I'm like, oh, is it this browser? Is that? So yes, for customers, for projects, and in my whole life, not as much as I'd like to, but I do as much pairing as I can to keep up to date.
Next, thank you. Okay, moved. You've mentioned several times to sit next to a colleague and ask You've mentioned several times to sit next to a colleague, and I think the question is, how do you handle this when almost everybody from the team is working from home?
Yeah. It was definitely easier to walk. So biscuit-driven developments. That I did invent that. That's walking around the office with biscuits and being like, "Would you like a biscuit? Can I sit down? Can I help? Anyone want a biscuit?" That's harder remotely. I think that the easy and yet hard answer is you have to be even more vulnerable. It's not like, oh, I was just wandering by your office. It was, I heard in stand-up today that you're going to be working on that, and it's really interesting to me, and it would totally help me if I could sit next to you. I think the trick is, especially when you're working with people who might be like, why is this person, are you controlling my work? Because I have this as a manager, I'm like, can I pair with you? Why? And the honest answer is because I want to learn. And you have to be very authentic about that, and you have to be very vulnerable about that. And so far, it's worked for me. So telling people that if you pair with them, that it's to help you primarily. It's a bit of a mind trick, but it also works, and it's true. So I think you have to be more explicit. You have to say, I want to do this. So it's a bigger hurdle, but I think it's possible.
Cool. Okay. The bong is 55 minutes. You've still got 5 if you want to carry on.
I mean, if nobody's run away or started crying yet, those are my 2 metrics. So there we go.
Okay, excellent. So doesn't it slow down development that developers do testing? They need to learn new tools and change mindset during the day. Is it worth it for the company? Does that make sense?
So it might slow down development, but it increases value. Fast development isn't the metric according to which I want to live my life. Something that's fast, but isn't going to help me. The thing that needs to get out to my customers, the thing that will make them pay the bills and not completely ruin us in the service period or a maintenance period, is if it's doing the thing that they want, if it's good quality, or let's go with good enough quality, because there is a danger there to get very excited. We do all of the things. I'm never advocating for doing more than you have to. That's gonna come back and bite me, isn't it? Doing the right amount. So not going too far off the other end, but it needs to bring value and it needs to have quality. Otherwise, sure, I've developed it, but I cannot, I tell this to teams all of the time, I cannot write an invoice for something that's just developed. That's not how it works. And if I try and do that, if I'm like, here you go, customer, that's going to come back and bite me horribly. So it might slow down development, but it will probably increase value, and that's what actually counts.
Excellent. Okay. Next. Each of those comb teeth takes a fair bit of time to develop. How to balance a heavy day-to-day workload with improving each of these?
Yeah.
How do you fit it in?
And so this is interesting. I firmly believe that one of the reasons that I got good at what I do is that I didn't just spend my time at work doing it. I am interested in it outside. I go to conference. I mean, my job has always paid for my conferences, but of course conferences take time. You're flying. I read things at the weekends. I do these things. At the same time, as a manager, I have to be very, very careful that I'm not expecting every single one of my... Some people have children. Some people have older parents. Some people don't want to. So there's a balance there of, if you're really passionate about something, I think it's okay to also take some time to do it and have the boundary that this comb, this isn't going to be what's on my gravestone. That's not going to be, at least I hope not. Probably just be oops. So have a life and be aware, like I said, be aware that the things that you do in your life. So a lot of people I know who are parents and who are good parents, turns out they're really good at conflict mediation. Don't know why. So all of the things you do that aren't just work can help as well. And again, this is the kind of company culture thing. We have a budget of, I think, like 150 hours a year that, to be honest with you, we don't even really track that hard, of using time for going to conferences, learning on your own. That should be any company that looks into the future and knows that we are going to have to grow and adapt should be paying for that as well. That's not meant to sound like an advert for us, but it is how I see the world.
Fantastic. Okay, next. Not long now. How would you handle this situation when the comb shows to management that this tester can handle all those things in the teeth? Not good. Not good, right? I'm not sure.
I'm going to have to read that.
The top one.
How do you handle the comb? I'm not sure what that means. I'm gonna just go with it. I don't know. Yusuf, maybe DM me on Twitter and I'll try and figure it out. I don't know how to answer that.
I don't know either. I'm not sure what it means. Okay, next. Each of these comb teeth takes a fair bit of time to develop.
I think we did that one.
We did that one. Sorry, big pun. I know. How would you try to convince the management to do cross-functional teams and comb shaping as just a normal tester?
Do you know what I did? I didn't convince management. I just did it. I didn't tell them. I went and started doing things within the team and tested things out and tried things out. There's a lovely saying that is definitely not valid in real life, in the sense of in a bar or anything. I don't want to get anyone on the wrong idea, but there's a saying that's, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Like I say, this is not how you pick up women, just really saying. But in terms of your work context, I didn't tell them. And again, here, a sort of metrics, heuristics for managers. If your manager is, can I finish my sentence? If your manager is micromanaging your team to the extent that they notice that you're doing an extra pairing session a week, I don't think that's good. So my answer would be, don't convince management, just start doing it and then be like, look, this is amazing.
Fantastic. Alex, thank you so very much.
Thank you.